I have here the Git repository that's also linked below, so you can check that out with everything that we're gonna spin up. Hello there and welcome to another hands-on full A to Z tutorial here on my YouTube channel. For those who are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Anais and this is 100 Days of Kubernetes, day 45, the challenge where we aim to learn something new related to Kubernetes across 100 days. Now today we're going to be looking at Terraform, specifically how we can spin up a Terraform repository that manages our infrastructure and the applications that are installed on our infrastructure. Now specifically, we're going to first set up a blank new repository. Then we're going to set up our Terraform providers. We basically have to tell Terraform about the type of resources that it has to learn about in order to spin them up and manage those. Once we have those initialized, those Terraform providers, we can then spin up a blank new Kubernetes cluster, a Civo Kubernetes cluster, and on that Civo Kubernetes cluster, we will want to install two applications. First of all, we're going to use a custom Helm chart within our repository. And then we're going to use the Kubernetes stack operator Helm chart from the internet. I'm going to show you how you can manage those through Terraform. Now for this tutorial, you don't need any Terraform experience. However, it's useful if you already have some Helm chart, Helming experience before. I have about 3 videos or more on Helm specifically, where you can learn how you can get started with Helm. They are linked up there. So check those out if you're completely new to Helm. Now these tutorials, they take me a long time to prepare since I'm spinning up the entire repository and showing everything from A to Z. Also with a blog post, you can check out if you prefer the written content, the blog post linked below. So if you do enjoy this type of content, if you enjoy this video, if it's useful for you, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel for upcoming videos, and hit the bell notification icon. I also have about bi-weekly live streams, so make sure to join those if you have any questions. If you have any questions in the meantime, we also have a Discord community chat, also linked below, where you can drop in, share resources related to the DevOps space, to Kubernetes, to infrastructure management, or similar. Also, if you enjoy this type of content, I have a weekly DevOps newsletter where I share free online learning resources from across the space, from amazing people such as yourself, right to your inbox. So please, if you enjoy this type of content and you want to support me and my content, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. That would mean so much to me. And let's get started. Okay, so this is the tutorial on my Notion page. I also have it on my blog post linked below, so you can check it out there. As you can see, there's quite a bit of stuff that we're going to do in this tutorial. I'm going to walk you through everything, so that's why it might take a little bit longer to do. Now, why do we want to use Helm Charts to manage our applications? A lot of people, especially I've seen those comments on Reddit, suggest that this is an overkill. You don't need Helm Charts to manage your applications. I disagree with that. I would actually argue that even with simple applications, you can use Helm Charts to manage those. And I'm going to show you in a second how you can use even simple Helm Charts to manage your applications. The thing is, with Helm Charts, let me zoom in here. You always have the templates, you have your custom resource definitions. So depending on the size of your application and the size of what you want to install, basically, you have different folders. And they are installed chronologically. Meaning, for example, the CODs are installed first before the templates, such as the deployments, are actually installed. So if you have more complex applications, there's a lot of logic that Helm manages for you. There's versioning that Helm manages for you, and a bunch of different benefits. The main one is, however, if you use a Helm chart such as this one, you can modify the values. So these are the values that you can pass into your Helm chart, that you can modify depending on your needs. So for example, at Civo, for our SRE work, we're using a lot of the Helm charts, such as this one, and we modify it based on our needs. We can modify the different variables that are basically specific to our infrastructure. And it makes it a lot more easier to manage through Helm, because we can see what is actually installed versus having to put it directly into the YAML and manage it directly through the YAML. We can manage it through Helm Charts. So Kubernetes stack, that's the Helm chart. There are obviously a bunch of different ones. However, it's really easy to install those to get started. They are managed by the community, so you don't have to maintain all of the resources yourself in many cases. There are lots and lots of benefits. However, installing Helm charts one by one is obviously really tedious, especially if they are dependent on each other. So this is where Terraform comes in. Now, Terraform has different providers, such as the Helm Provider. And the Helm Provider basically allows us to tell Terraform, hey, there's this provider, this resource, this type of object that I want to use and that I want to tell you more information about on how you should manage, for example, those Helm charts. So you can have a look at this provider to see additional configuration, how to set everything up. And let's just get started. I have here the Git repository that's also linked below, so you can check that out with everything that we're gonna spin up. Now let's check that out here within my VS Code. So here's the README with the instructions, which are a bit shorter than what I have in the blog post. So first we will have to set up our provider. Now this is the provider. I'm basically providing the Civo provider, and then also the here Civo Terraform provider, and then I'm setting up the Kubernetes provider, and I'm setting up the Helm provider. Now in some cases I might want to actually use Kubernetes directly and not Helm in some rare cases, but as you can see, Helm basically wraps the Kubernetes provider in itself. So we're going to set that up first. You can take that directly either from the Git repository, or like either you clone it or you copy paste it. However, this is what we're going to do first. We're going to take an empty repository that's over here. So in this one, there's nothing. So we're going to open it up first. And then within that repository, we're going to set up a provider.tf file. TF, there's the F. And then we're going to paste in our provider information. Now, in this case, let's leave out the Helm provider, or at least in the blog post, I'm installing that later on. You can do it right away, or you can leave it out and follow the blog post. Now I'm setting up everything at once right now. Now let's open up a terminal, and you want to have Terraform installed. Now you can install it really easily through brew. So I've listed some of the installation options here right at the beginning, so you can check those out. So you can basically brew, install, and then here brew tab HashiCorp tab, and then you can install the Terraform modules. I guess that's what you call them. So, and then once you have that, you have Terraform installed, and you have the different options here for Terraform, right? So we are not going to do much customization. What we do, however, need is here, we need a variables file, since we have here our Civo token that we're passing in. So what you can do, basically, you can set up within Terraform, you can set up a variables.tf file. And that variables.tf file allows you to specify variables dynamically. So for example, let's say I have a variable that I want to use on multiple parts within my repository, right? I don't want to hard code them everywhere, right? I don't want to put everywhere. I will show you an example in a second. Instead, I want to define them in one place dynamically, where I can change it in that one place. So here's my variables.tf file. As you can see, I have here my Civo token that I just referenced, and then the cluster name that I want to use, the number of nodes, and so on. So I'm just going to use this and paste it into my variables.tf file. Okay, so that it basically will have access to my Civo token. Now I need my Civo token, so if you don't have a Civo account yet, then sign up to Civo. Here's my Civo account. This is my dashboard. Now here, as you can see, I have one cluster right now running within the London 1 region. You can also use New York, which you would have to modify within Terraform itself. I'm going to show you that in a second. Let's go to account, go to settings, and then within security, we have here our Civo token, and I'm going to change that up after this video, so don't even try to use it. And I'm going to pass it in, okay? So it can use it. Now I want to initialize the provider. Now it has access to this variable called Civo token here, var.civo token. That's basically how you reference it. So I'm going to say Terraform and then init, if it's correctly referenced. And then it's basically taking all those providers and basically starting a .terraform file with which references those providers. Now I'm still learning about a lot of the stuff. As you can see, here's the HashiCorp one with the Helm provider and the Kubernetes provider, and here's my Civo provider. everything set up here. Now, what do we want to do next? We want to spin up a Civo Kubernetes cluster. So we're going to say cluster.tf. And in this file, we're going to specify what type of Kubernetes cluster we actually want to set up, right? So let's go, that's not what I want to open. Let's go back to the other file. And here's my cluster resource. Now, as you can see, I'm also specifying where the cluster name, where the applications I want to install on my cluster, the number of nodes that I want to use, the region. That's all specified within here. So this is basically my Kubernetes cluster resource. And then I'm also specifying the instance size separately as like a data resource. And that depends on my Civo Kubernetes cluster. This one depends, basically that has to be installed first. That like to get the data out of it, it has to be installed first. So this has to be spin up in order for me to get the data out of it. That's basically how I understand it. So you have to, in some cases, you have to have a depends on, because the thing is, I want to obviously only move forward with my Helm release installations once the Kubernetes cluster is spin up. So if I put the depends on here, then I'm making sure already that the Civo Kubernetes cluster is already spin up before I'm actually moving on to the next steps. So I'm going to take that and then I'm going to paste it in here. And now I want to go ahead and I want to install this Kubernetes cluster. So let's do a Terraform plan, and the Terraform plan will basically show me kind of like a dry run of what's gonna actually spin up. What is Terraform actually gonna manage? So in this case, I don't have to specify much more. We're gonna dive into next tutorials in more detail and more advanced usage of Terraform. So in this case, it's going to say it's going to spin up one new resource. There's 0 to change, 0 to destroy. I didn't delete any resource. I just want to spin up a new resource. So let's go ahead and also add an output.tf file. And I'm going to show you in a second why.tf file. So this is the output.tf file. And in this file, we can specify what I actually want to what information I want to have displayed upon the resource being installed. So for example, I can say that I want to have access to the Kubernetes cluster kubeconfig that's going to be created, right? So I can specify then get access to the data that Terraform now knows about of like my Civo Kubernetes cluster and the .cluster resource. That's basically how you specify it. It's here, the Kubernetes cluster, Civo Kubernetes cluster, and then the name is cluster in this case. It's a really creative name. And so let's go back to the output section. So this is the different outputs that I want to have, including my kubeconfig to be able to connect to the cluster, right? So I have now my cluster TF, my output TF, my provider TF, and my variables TF. I hope it's clear what all of those are. I also have it in the Git repository. I have it in the README. I have it in more detail defined. Over here, what are those files for that we're going to spin up, so you can always cross-check those also within the blog post. So, okay, this is all set up. Now we can do a Terraform apply, right? I wanted to apply my cluster resource. I wanted to spin up a new Kubernetes cluster. Now, you can also set up the entire repository and then do everything at the end at once. You don't have to do it step by step of first setting up the cluster, right? But in this case, I just want to show how you can use Terraform to just spin up a cluster itself and manage that cluster, right? You can, for example, then have the different resources defined. So this is different to pressing buttons. This is more like the GitOps way of defining resources. Of everything is going to be defined in Git, right? This is all those files are committed in Git. So you can just have a look at what's actually running, what kind of resources am I creating, and that makes it easier for you to create exactly the same environment. But also as a team, it allows us to have reproducible workflows in the long term. Now, there are a bunch of benefits. You can check out my Argo CD video if you have, which includes a lot on GitOps, if you have further questions. So let's apply this resource, yeah? Let's go ahead and apply this resource. So this is going to create a terraform.tf state file, which is basically going to manage the state. Now, it's going to tell me again what it's going to be creating. So in this case, it's just going to create a resource. Before you apply, you always want to make sure it's actually creating the right resource, right? So in this case, this is the right resource. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to apply it. And this is going to create my Civo Kubernetes cluster. Now this is going to take a few seconds, right? So in the meantime, I'm going to show you what we're going to do next. Once we have that, we're going to set up a charts directory. And within the charts directory, we want to have our custom charts. Now in this case, I just used the default Nginx chart that comes with it. Now you can modify this chart obviously as well. We can modify this chart, right? I can show you in a second also how to modify it, but that's kind of beyond the scope of this video. So we're going to set up a custom chart within the charts directory. And once we have that, we want to create a Helm release for that chart. So this is basically our resource that we're going to create. So type Helm release. It's an Nginx chart. We could just call it Nginx. But here, this chart name is important because it's going to look within the charts directory. It's going to look for the Nginx chart. And then it's going to create a new namespace, also called Nginx, in which it's going to install that chart. So I'm basically telling it what to install and where to install it to with this little file. So let's see if this already spun up. It's still creating. It should take like about 1 to 2 minutes to create. Let's have a look at the dashboard and see it being created. Here, so a Terraform example chart. Now this is just spinning up right now. Let's fast forward until it's done. Oh, and it's done. That was not very useful. Okay, so going back, as you can see, here it applied the resource correctly. And here's my output. Here's the kubeconfig that I want to use. So let's copy this kubeconfig here from API version. And let's just create a file called kubeconfig. Kubeconfig. And we're going to paste it in here, our kubeconfig. Okay. And once we have that, we can say export, and we can basically say our kubeconfig is equal to this kubeconfig over here, right? So once I say that, see my Kubernetes cluster here. Oh, you can't really see it. Let me change this up. Let me change this. Let me put myself over here for a second. So you can see that the kubeconfig here changed from my demo example cluster to my Terraform example cluster. Now both of those are managed within Civo. So both of those are here demo example and Terraform example. So now I'm connected to my Terraform example cluster over here, okay? So now that we have that, we can connect to it. We can say kubectl. Somebody asked or told me that I should have an alias of like kubectl. I do have it set up. I just usually use kubectl, since if you don't have it set up, it might be confusing if I just use k. Anyway, so kubectl get notes. Here, let me show you what I just talked about. Okay, kubectl get notes. So as you can see, these are my 3 nodes that are just gonna have been spun up. And kubectl get namespace. As you can see here, my default namespaces. Now I don't have right now the Nginx namespace set up, right? So let's install that. Let's create a charts repository, and then within charts, cd charts. What we want to do is we want to Helm create and create an Nginx chart. Now we're just going to call this chart Nginx. You can install any other custom chart that you want to. We're just going to use the normal Nginx chart, right? Helm create Nginx. And then within here, if we refresh, we will have our Nginx chart. Now this is the normal template chart with the Helm create command that comes automatically, okay? So once you have a Helm chart set up, independent of Terraform, independent of any resource that you use, what you want to use is to test your Helm charts. Let me just focus on the terminal for now. You want to use Datree. Now Datree allows you to easily test your Kubernetes manifests, whether those are pure YAML manifests or those are Helm charts. Let's have a look at the Datree website. Datree, getting started. Now this is the docs. we can also go directly to Datree. Now the goal is to prevent Kubernetes misconfigurations from reaching your production clusters, right? Before you install anything, you want to make sure it's correctly set up. Now, especially when you're getting started with Kubernetes, it's quite difficult to know what actually has to be included within your manifests. And so Datree allows you to set up policies. Basically, what has to be true, or how do your manifests have to be defined in order to pass the tests, right? So you can use Datree directly just by getting started through the simple curl command. Just here are all the different options on how you can get started. It also has a Docker image. So you can use it also in your CI/CD pipeline. There are also different options of using it in your CI/CD pipeline. Now, then when you run Datree tests and you specify a file, so let's go back to our terminal. Datree test, it's going to test like this example file in this case. Now in this case, for this example file, it's correctly set up, everything passes. Now let's check if our example chart that's directly pulled from Helm passes as well. So for that, we will need the Datree Helm plugin. Here, Datree Helm plugin. Now you can directly install it with Helm plugin install. You can extend Helm with different plugins. It's really, really useful. It's really handy. So in this case, I already have it set up. The plugin is already installed. So I can directly use it with Helm Datree test and then my charts directory. I can also pass in the specific values that I want to use or similar, like how I would use Helm. But in this case, I'm going to use the Datree test command from the plugin. So I'm going to say, going back over here, Helm Datree test, and then this is from the root directory. Now in this case, I'm already one directory up, so we can just say Helm Datree test and then nginx. Okay, we want to test that chart. So now it's directly testing our Helm chart, and as you can see, 6 of the 19 rules did not pass. Now you can have a look at the specific rules by following this link that's provided to you once you use Datree, where you can see the different policies that are basically set up. You can modify them, but the goal is ultimately to modify your Helm chart, right? The goal is that you modify this Helm chart to pass. Now, this is for another video. I'm not going to go ahead and modify that right now. I'm going to go ahead and actually trust the Helm maintainers for creating this chart in a okay manner. So now we have this Helm chart. We want to manage it through Terraform, right? So we say Helm release, and then we say nginx.tf, right? And in this file, we're going to post the Helm release for this chart, right? So this one, what I told you about earlier. So we're just going to post it in here. And then, in addition to that, we also want to use the Helm release Prometheus. Prometheus.tf. Okay, that's our other Helm release that we want to set up. So going back, I'm just going to copy paste that. It's a similar process over here. So you have the name. In this case, we're just going to call it prom, and the chart is called Kube Prometheus Stack. That's the chart that it's going to install all of our Prometheus resources. Now, this is the repository link. You can find that directly within the Git repository. I'm going to create a new namespace called monitoring, and here, create namespace 2, since it doesn't exist yet. And then I'm going to basically install that Helm chart over there. Now, you could set different variables. You could say set, and then you could basically say key value, I think, something like that. So you can pass in the different values into the Helm chart. So you don't have to have a values YAML file, such as here. You could, for example, say image.repository, that's the value, or like the key, and then the value is nginx in this case. So you could pass it in directly over here. You can show that in more detail if you're curious on how to do that. So you might wonder, how does Terraform know about which cluster these resources to install to? These these two to install to? Well, we have here our kubeconfig, so we're connected to it right now, but that doesn't matter to Terraform. Terraform doesn't know about the cluster that I'm connected to, because I'm telling it in the provider that it has to, through the Helm Provider, it has to connect to the data.civo Kubernetes cluster.cluster object, like this object that's stored within my data resource. I hope I used the right terminology. So we can say Terraform and then state list, and this will give me the states that Terraform is tracking right now. So I can, for example, take this resource here, this data.civo Kubernetes cluster.cluster, and then I can go ahead and say Terraform console, and within the Terraform console, I can query that object that it knows about. So once the console starts, okay, cool. And once I query it, I get all the information on this cluster, right? So I know what's within the cluster, what I can use to actually connect to it. That's basically the information on the cluster that we created earlier, right? And I just did that. You can create everything all at once. I just did it to show you how I exit. So how I tell Terraform where to install those Helm charts to, right? So let's do another Terraform plan to see whether those two Helm charts will now be created, right, within our cluster, if it can actually create it. So let's do a Terraform plan and wait for it to process. So as you can see here, there are two more resources to add: 0 to change, 0 to destroy. Now, which are the resources? So first is a Helm release called Prometheus in this case, and the second one is the Helm release Nginx, right? These are the two resources that we want to create. So once we're happy with it, we can go ahead and do Terraform and then an apply of those resources, right? We want to apply them to our cluster. Now this will then create a state and make sure that the basically it compares our actual state within our Kubernetes cluster with our desired state that we have defined here. So this is our desired state. These resources define what state do we want our resource to be in. What state do we want our cluster to be in? We want to have those two Helm charts installed. Now, that means if I can't find those two Helm charts being installed and managed through Terraform in the cluster, that it will have to create them. So in this case, it's basically just telling me these are the two resources, like we just looked at, that it's going to create. And I can say, yes, I want to create them on my cluster, right? And now it's going to make sure that it's going to install those resources. So the actual state is the desired state of our cluster, right? So those are both the same. Now, as you can see, it's going to create our Helm release Nginx and our Helm release Prometheus. It's going to create both at the same time because they are not dependent on each other. Now, what do you do if you already have Helm charts installed within your cluster? You will have to pass in additional labels or annotations on your on those Helm charts, so Terraform can actually take over the management of those Helm charts that are already installed within our cluster. The easiest way is obviously to do directly through Terraform versus first installing Helm charts and then making sure later on that they are managed through Terraform, right? So let's wait until this is all finished, and then we can take a look into our Kubernetes cluster and make sure that everything is running correctly and set up correctly and the chart and everything is working. Now at this point, I want to give a special shout out to Datree, who helped me in supporting this content, in collaborating with me to make this possible, to make these kind of tutorials possible, because it obviously take a long time to create. So if you enjoy this kind of tutorial and you want to make sure others see it too, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for upcoming videos. That would mean a lot to me. Also, I have a weekly DevOps newsletter where I share free online learning resources from across the space to your inbox from amazing people such as yourself, so make sure to subscribe to that. But yeah, it would mean a lot to me if you can hit the like button on this video, subscribe to my channel for upcoming videos, and let's continue with the video. So as you can see, this is again the output. Since we specified that this is always going to be the output that's going to be provided to us when we spin up resources, it's always going to provide those. It's not just going to provide those right now when we create a cluster. So as you can see, those two resources have been created. So we already connected to that cluster through this kubeconfig that we specified earlier. So we're just going to say kubectl get namespace, right? We want to see our namespace. And now we can see that the Nginx and the monitoring namespace have been created. So kubectl get all in namespace Nginx. And as you can see here, this is everything is created. Now we can connect to the service, right? We can do a port forwarding on the service to make sure it's working. So kubectl, and then we say port forward and of the service. And the service is in namespace Nginx. And we want to have, let's say 9,000 going to 80, since this is running on port 80. It shouldn't run on port 80, but it is running on port 80. So let's see if we can open it up on localhost 9000, localhost 9000, and it says welcome to Nginx. Now you can obviously modify it. You don't have to run Nginx. In this case, I'm just using the default chart, right, to show you how you could use custom charts within your Terraform repository. Now this is working. Let's also have a look at the other one, kubectl get all in namespace monitoring. And as you can see, here's our entire deployment from my Kubernetes stack operator chart. Now I want to connect to this one, this service, the Kubernetes stack Prometheus service. So I'm going to do the same, but with this port forwarding. So port forwarding, and we're going to do 9090 to port 9090 to port 9090. It's a namespace monitoring in this case, monitoring. And we're going to change up the service since it's a different service. And let's port forward that and check out 9090. That we can actually see Prometheus. As you can see, everything is working. It's managed right now through Terraform. It's installed on our cluster. Now you can spin up everything at once. You don't have to do it in this chronological order like I did. If you prefer the written content, again, blog post link below. Now this is it for today. I hope this video tutorial was useful. If it was, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. And if you prefer the written content, check out the Git repository link below as well as the blog post. If you have any feedback, any comments, suggestions, anything you would like to see in upcoming videos, please also comment those below or drop into our community chat and just start a conversation there. I hope to see you in upcoming videos. Have a lovely day. Bye bye.